Let's get a recording done. Okay, so let me just give you a quick overview of what we're going to discuss today. First thing we're going to do is Danny's going to give you a bit of an overview and perhaps a demo. I'm looking over at Danny. He's laughing and shaking his head.
Just an overview.
Just an overview, no demo of the new Experiment CRD, which is a new Argo thing we have been working on recently. I'm going to then give really a bit of an overview. We're really keen for people to get involved from the community to do contributions, and what I'll do is just kind of walk through some of the materials that will help with that, and talk a little bit about how you can do things like third-party integrations as well. Then Alex, another Alex, they're everywhere, will do a demo of a bit of work we've done around Tekton and Argo CD. And then we'll cover off a bit about what's coming up on the Argo CD roadmap and talk about how you can perhaps have some influence and impact on that. And then finally, we're going to talk about something new we're thinking about doing, like to get your feedback, which is perhaps doing some office hours in the future. But what we'll do is we'll come back to that at the end of the meeting. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass over to Danny, who's going to take over and give you the overview of the Experiments CRD.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danny. I am also an engineer at Intuit, and I am one of the main contributors to Argo rollouts. In case if you haven't heard of it, Argo rollouts is a relatively new project that basically tries to provide additional strategies to the deployment object. One of the things it currently supports is a canary strategy, where it will basically allow you to run a new version of your application in tandem with your old one. One issue we've kind of run into with the current canary strategy is that it doesn't really make analysis of the running canary easy. It basically puts the onus onto the user to kind of orchestrate that outside of the rollout object. And so that's not the kind of the user experience that we want. And before I kind of dive into what we think the solution is, I just want to first briefly cover what we think the problems that we want to solve. So like first, with said analysis, we want to make it easy for users to basically identify if that metric that they want to look at is coming from the canary version versus the baseline version. We want the rollout to basically provide that kind of like injection point so that you don't have to kind of construct these very specific queries to your database backend in order to limit your metrics to, let's say, the canary version. We want to enable, I call it apples to apples comparisons. What I mean by that is if you compare a canary pod that's been running for the last 10 minutes to a stable pod that's been running for the last week, that's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison, because the metrics of said, or at least I think the canonical example is like a Java JVM metrics, memory metrics. Those memories might not be in sync, and so we want to be able to create both a canary and a baseline instance at the same time. So when you do the comparison of those two, it's a apples to apples comparison. And lastly, we want to be able to run multiple experiments at the same time, so we can have the ability to run 3 different versions and kind of run tests in parallel. And so to do that, we're going to introduce a new custom resource called an experiment. And so I will ask Alex to give the screen back to me, or at least to stop sharing the screen.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so I will take over.
Okay. I thought you already had. Embarrassing.
And so here is the experiment CRD. The experiment CRD will basically solve a couple of these issues that I talked about earlier. The first thing I kind of want to point out is that in the experiment CD, you have a list of templates. So these templates will basically correspond, or at least have a pod spec. So like here and here, these are pretty bare bones, but it's kind of just the basic idea. And so when you submit an experiment, the experiment will basically create each of these templates as a separate replica set and then run them for a duration. So in this case, 10 minutes. During that time, those replica sets will run, and once that duration ends, we will either delete the replica sets or scale them down to 0, depending on, or at least we will make that configurable. And so that kind of solves the problem of the apple-to-apples comparison, where users will be able to launch both a canary and a baseline instance at the same time, run them in tandem. Additionally, this solves running multiple experiments at once because you can submit multiple experiment CRDs, and each of those will create a unique experiment. And so that will allow us to run multiple at the same time. However, with what I have listed here, this doesn't really do anything to kind of address the analysis of these experiments. And so to do that, we are thinking about adding a field within the experiment called analysis. So in the analysis field, you can kind of specify different values to basically run queries against a data source. In this case, we're thinking Prometheus. And these queries will basically be used to validate if your experiment is basically healthy or unhealthy. And so with this, we want to make it configurable so that it's easy to kind of inject the labels that will help you identify whether the metrics you're analyzing are from the canary or the baseline. But we're still kind of ironing out this, the analysis side, because it gets a little bit complicated, and there are a lot of, we want to kind of do a little bit more research onto what other tools are doing so that we can create a solution that takes the best of all those different toolings. Potentially, this could be separated out into a separate CRD if this gets complicated enough, but I think it's a little bit too early to kind of talk to that, or at least make a decision on that. So with this, we are able to run an experiment and analyze said experiment. Question is, how does this connect to rollouts, rollout objects? So within the canary strategy, we are going to add a new step called experiment. With the experiment step, it will, you can specify templates. So you can say, I want a baseline template from the stable replica set, meaning the previous version that is considered stable. And we can create a template from the canary spec, which it will take from the latest replica set that you are trying to transition to. And so what this will do is this will convert this template into a experiment object, submit that experiment object, run it for a configurable amount of time, and then once that experiment is over, the rollout will proceed to the next steps. And so that will allow us to have that analysis of, or at least allow us to have both that apples to apples comparison, that analysis of your rollout object, or at least of your application, all within the rollout object, so you don't have to try to orchestrate this using any external tools. So that's kind of a high-level overview of the experiment object. At this point, we're still very, very early on. We are just starting to do an implementation of the experiment CRD. I think with, or at least with the 0.5 release, we'll want to include the experiments, but we probably won't include the analysis since I think that's going to require further investigation. So that's kind of the experiment CRD in a nutshell. So I will kind of open it up to the crowd if you have any feedback, any questions, any concerns.
What about, would you like people to ask any questions now?
Or yeah, we can do questions now.
Okay. Or people maybe they don't have questions.
That's also fine. Yeah, just want to kind of give an update on where we're going with Argo rollouts and kind of what the roadmap is. For query, will you allow manual intervention? So there, are you asking if, let's say if you run a query, it returns like a value that's, it's not necessarily failing, but it's not necessarily passing, and you would want a user to basically make a decision, a manual decision. Awesome. Yes, that's something that we would want to kind of incorporate with the analysis. I think that there are some other tools that kind of have that functionality, and then we would want to be able to have that too. Awesome. Any other questions? If not, I'll turn it back to Alex.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay, let's see if I can be more successful this time with it. Is it sharing or not?
Not. It is now.
There we go. That took a few seconds to sort out. Okay, guys. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about getting involved in committing to Argo. I'm mostly going to speak specifically about Argo CD here, but this probably also applies to Argo workflows and other Argo projects. The first thing I want to cover off is, why would you do this? Anybody who's tried to raise an issue so far, raise a bug against Argo CD, will know that there is a comment in the template for that asks you if you've thought about contributing yourself. And obviously the reasons that we give that is contribution is very good for you to gain additional skills, looks great on your CV, and most importantly, kind of builds the community about Argo and makes that a healthy, vibrant community. I'm going to point out one really important resource for anybody using Argo CD. I'm hoping everybody has seen this, but if you go to Argo CD, there is a set of documentations on our website, and this documentation is broken down actually into 3 sections. It's broken down into an operator manual, which basically contains articles around installing, configuring, and administrating Argo CD. Then it contains a user guide. This is for anybody using Argo CD on a day-to-day basis to create and sync applications. And there is a 3rd section of the guide called the developer guide. Now, this part of the guide is actually aimed at people who want to contribute to Argo CD or who want to do some kind of third-party integration. And there's a contributing guide in here that tells you how to get it set up. And there's also an area you might want to take a look at, which is the API docs, which also shows you how to access the Swagger UI. Now, Argo CD has a Swagger UI, a REST-based API you can speak to and do third-party integrations. So we don't necessarily always want to bring in new features into the core of Argo CD, and this allows you to just access the same APIs we use in the user interface and the CLI to do that. So here are the resources. I'm just going back to what I wanted to talk about. So if you want to get help doing this, obviously just reach out to us in the Slack channel. We can talk you through stuff, and also we can help you if you've already submitted a pull request or you have an issue you want to have questions asked about. You can find out what issues are interesting and useful by having a look in the issues here. And there are a couple of labels I'm just going to draw your attention to in terms of trying to find an issue that might be a good issue to start with, or issue that we're looking for somebody to help us with. So the first one is good first issue. And if you filter that, that'll show you issues that should be a good introduction to working with the code base that aren't necessarily going to take you too long to do. They may or may not be a bit more UI orientated. So if you're into Node and JavaScript and React, that might be an interesting area for you. There may be a bit more back-end orientated. So if you're into kind of more hardcore Kubernetes, or want to learn Golang, which is a lovely language. Coming from a Java background, I love Go because it's so simple and so easy. You can pick it up in just a couple of hours. That'll give you an area of to have a look at. If you're also interested in looking at finding ones that we kind of want people to help with, maybe they're not quite within our wheelhouse, or not necessarily like a number one priority, you can actually add this second label, which is help wanted, and that'll highlight all the issues that we want people to come and give us a bit of help with. And if you don't want to just do a good first issue, you can see there's a few issues in there that might be useful and interesting to you. We've also introduced a new thing called Argo Labs. If I can find the no, this is the wrong one.
Argo Labs project.
That one.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. So this is, let me just find the actual repository. This is an organization on GitHub that's separate from the main Argo, that is an area for people to provide and submit stuff that is kind of similar, that works in the same ballpark as Argo. So there's a couple of ones here that are already on. This is Argo Notified. So that basically is a labs project that notifies you of changes to CRDs, sorry, not CRDs, yes, to application specs. So for example, that'll allow you to determine when a particular resource goes from healthy to unhealthy, for example, and you'll get a Slack message or an email when that happens. An Argo bot that is there to, as it says, automate Kubernetes deployments from GitHub PR. So that's like a tight integration between Argo and GitHub, because Argo is not doesn't care which Git provider you use. You can use GitLab or Bitbucket or any other provider. Argo bot is a tighter integration if you're very much using Argo and with GitHub. I've covered what we would like help with. So those are there. You can have a little look, kind of poke around. If something takes your interest, reach out to us. If you want to get that badge on your profile, on your CV, that additional stuff, that's a great way to do it. And just ping us via Slack to find out more. Any questions? I can't get the thing up. I feel like it should show me the chat, but it's not showing it to me.
Yeah, here.
Yes. Okay. So that's another question about your thing, Danny, actually. Do you want to come back to that at the end?
Sure.
Okay, we'll do that. Okay. Now let's see if Alex is available.
I am available. Can you hear me? Hello. Oh my God. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Great. Okay, so let me start sharing my screen. Can you see my screen? My screen is visible, right? You can see it. Awesome. Okay, so as you know, as you probably heard already, Tekton is a new project built mostly by Google. So, and it implements CI/CD pipelines and run it natively on Kubernetes. So, and we've got questions as well as Tekton team got questions like how Argo CD and Tekton, work together, and if there is any overlap. And the conclusion is Tekton basically mostly focused on CI and tight integration with Git providers like GitLab, GitHub. It's supposed to have eventually webhooks and more features related to artifact management, but instead of rebuilding CD part, it is going to be integrated with projects like Argo CD. So, and last month, I guess, we made the first step, and one of our interns, Aditya, he implemented an integration between Tekton and Argo CD. So, and I can show you what that integration looks like. So, at the current state, Tekton just maintain catalog of basically YAML files, and each file is a task. And you will have to learn more a little bit about Tekton to figure out, what it supports. And one block of Tekton is a task, which is similar to Argo workflow, except it is, CI focused. And here we go. We have Argo CD task, and currently this task implements login to Argo CD and sync and wait. So basically, if you use this task, you don't have to use kubectl at all. Instead, you can just invoke the task and point it to the application, and task will log into Argo CD, sync the application, and then it will stuck in a waiting state until application is healthy. And I can quickly show you the YAML file, and then we can switch to the demo. So this is how YAML file looks like. Basically, it has 3 steps. One of them is login, and it can take either username, password, or just existing token. And next, it will execute sync using Argo CLI, and then wait again using Argo CLI. Plus, you have additional parameters like flag, in case, let's say, if your Argo CD is insecure and you want to use insecure connection, plus you can customize the version of Argo CD, and basically it will decide which binary version of a binary to connect to Argo CD. And the README file in Argo CD task also demonstrate, how would you use it. And the typical example is, so if you can imagine this typical CI/CD pipeline. One step you might want to have, in this case it's named git push, but basically this is the step which is supposed to make a change to your deployment manifests. Usually it's, if you use customize, you would execute here something like git clone, customize set image, which will update image, and then git push. And once that step is executed, your application would be out of sync. And next step will sync it and make sure it's healthy. And does anyone have questions at this point? If not, I'm going to switch to demo. So in this demo, I'm not going to run the whole CI/CD pipeline because it's like too much. I'm just going to execute the sync status manually. To do that, I just pick a random application on existing Argo CD, and I made it out of sync. What I did before the demo, I just modified the image, and now image doesn't match to the image in the Git. Next, I want to switch to Tekton. So I already have Tekton installed in my cluster, and I created the task run file. Sorry. So task run is just a single step from the pipeline. What it does, it executes the task. In this example, I'm going to execute Argo CD task, and I'm going to pass just one parameter, which is application name, and it's Jenkins, because I'm going to sync Jenkins application. So let's go ahead and do it. So once my task run is created, Tekton is supposed to pick it up and create pods. This pod was just created and now it's running. And let's take a look at logs. And as you can see, we have 3 containers, 1 container for each step. And we should take a look at login step first. And it's completed successfully. So basically, Tekton was able to get credentials and token to Argo CD using username and password. Next step is a sync step. And as we can see, sync just completed. If we switch back to UI, we can see that application is synchronized and it's still progressing. And hopefully last step is still running because application is not yet healthy. And yeah, so it's still running. So pod is not yet completed and we can see logs of the wait step. So it's now waiting for the healthy. And once Jenkins starts, which might take like a few minutes, this step should successfully be completed and demo is done. That's pretty much it. So if you have questions, it's a good time to ask them. And if not, then Alex, you can continue.
Thank you, Alex. I'm just going to share my screen again.
Mm-hmm.
Find the button. Okay, go. Is that working? Yes, it is. So I just wanted to quickly go through the Argo CD roadmap and talk about what we are doing at the moment and what we've got coming up. So we're just in the process of releasing version 1.1. That's got 66 different kind of bugs and features in it. A couple of interesting ones I like to point out are the one around timing out fork tool processes. We found that sometimes tools take too long, and so now they'll get terminated if they're running. One around the ability to sync applications asynchronously, so not kind of waiting for them to complete and then failing with an error, so that's successful. And what else do we have here that's interesting? Well, we have sync waves, which is quite a big feature that allows you to give a wave to a particular resource. So when Argo CD syncs, it'll sync your resources in order, waiting for previously synced resources to be healthy before proceeding with the next wave. So that's useful, for example, if you want to get a back-end system up and healthy before you want to then deploy the front-end system. And then we've got 1.2 coming up. So this one's been really focused on a lot of usability enhancements in this release. There's still a few open issues in this one as well. Just fixing a lot of kind of rough edges in terms of usability. That's not just whether or not the UI works, but whether or not we provide the right good error messages or things like that. So there aren't any particular big features in there, but I would like to highlight we're going to provide anonymous read-only access to the web UI, so you don't need to log into it if you want to with configuration. Configuration management plugins are going to have a bit more configurability around them. You'll be able to create a sync failure hook. So if your sync fails, there'll be a hook that you can run on that failure. I think that's a pretty neat one. You can do things. We're providing a build status badge. I just put cool next to that because I think that's quite neat. Little, just to see if your application is healthy. And a couple of other ones that people have been asking for, such as the browser, rather than showing times in UTC, which is not particularly helpful, it'll now show times in your local time, and actually it'll say, it was 10 seconds or 3 minutes since the sync, rather than a long string, which is a quite small change, but I think that makes quite a big difference. And another one is shows commit metadata in application revision history. I might just show you. I think that's quite fun. I'll just show you a little screenshot of that one if we have one. So in the screen, it'll now show you what you've synced to in the application status one, so you know exactly where you are at the moment. And then we're going to look forward a bit further ahead to version 1.3. This one's intended currently to be focused on Helm, that we're having a few discussions about. Is that the right thing for us to be focusing on, or if there are other things to be focusing on? So that's the current upcoming Argo CD roadmap. Now that roadmap is based on, I guess, two things really. What we need So things that we need ourselves, we tend to prioritize those, but also things that are popular in terms of the number of thumbs up that things get in there. And by thumbs up, I mean thumbs up here. So the more thumbs up an issue has, the more kind of likely we are to look at it. And if you go and look at, you can actually go into GitHub and you can sort issues based on the most reactions down here, and you can see the most thumbs up, and you can see that kind of tells you what people are really interested in. What that kind of means is that the more thumbs up you give something, the more likely we are to look at. And we do want you to kind of express your interest in terms of what issues or enhancements that are important to you by giving them the thumbs up. Because if you don't say anything, you don't have a vote, and you don't have a voice. Okay, so that's the roadmap. Does anybody have any questions about that before I move on? All completely self-explanatory. Brilliant. I'm going to get the chat window up because I've hidden it. Oh, 3 chats going on.
Yeah, here I'll also have it.
Just the word cool. Okay, brilliant. Okay. Okay. One thing we've been discussing about having is operating some office hours. So office hours is when we would be available to speak about your issues, and we don't know how often to do this for, how long to do it, or so how often to do it? Is it every week or every 2 weeks? How long? Is it an hour? Is it 2 hours? Is it 3 hours? And how should we do it? Should it be video or some other mechanism? So I'd like to just open that up to the room to see if anybody has any thoughts about that, whether they would come along to that, whether they'd find that useful, or actually they are quite happy with the existing process of raising issues through GitHub, or if they're happy with just using Slack. Okay, so we've got one comment for Orion. He says Slack would probably be most effective. Open office hours would also be nice. And Stephen's has given a thumbs up. Okay, so we'll discuss that internally. We'll try and find a time that's appropriate for everybody. Maybe we'll do it roughly the same time each week, maybe on a Wednesday, interleaved with this. Okay, that kind of brings us to the end of the meeting agenda. If you have any questions, now's a good time to ask them. Also, you can come and find us on Slack and come and chat to us there. Okay, I'm going to take that as there are no more questions. Okay, guys. Okay, well, thank you very much. Oh, we have a question.
Sorry, I just can't type fast enough. I'm Orion. I work for Greenhouse Software. I'm wondering, do you guys have a roadmap for Argo workflows itself?
I don't know the answer to that question myself, but perhaps we can come back to you and message you.
This is Jesse speaking.
Oh, here we go.
Hey, yeah, so for the workflow roadmap, so 2.4, we are close to coming with a release candidate for that. That is primarily a stability release and trying to catch up on the backlog of issues. The 2.5 release for workflows, we're working towards basically rewriting the backend. Basically, we don't have a formal API server for workflows, and a lot of the stuff that you can do from the CLI, like resubmitting a workflow, pausing, resuming, all of those functionality we would like in a in the UI. And to do that, you have to have like a proper API server to execute those same commands. So the API server, it will be the primary feature of the 2.5 release of Argo workflows. Aside from that, it's open. Items are open to get into 2.5. We do want to incorporate yes, I forgot. 2.4 also includes persistence, but persistence only means that workflows can offload their status to a database, just so that you can have permanent storage for your workflows. And so the 2.5 release the API server would leverage the persistence layer so that you could see workflows in the UI, like going back for as long as you store the workflows in that database. Any other questions?
Thanks. Zaakala asks how frequent these community meetings happen. We were previously running them once a month. We took a little bit of hiatus last month. We're not sure. I think we're still discussing how often that will be. Thanks, question mark. Okay. Okay, great stuff. Okay, let's wrap up. If you've got any more questions or follow-ups, please come and find us on Slack and just ask us. My name's Alex. This has been Danny doing a demo and another Alex. We have spares lying around, and I hope you guys have enjoyed today. Have a good day or a good evening, depending on where you are. Okay, bye-bye.